Hi, and welcome to Asteria's Convos, where we are community, building the future. I'm your host, Asteria Elzea, hosting from land currently known as Los Angeles that has been tended for thousands of years by the Tongva and Chumash peoples. I owe everything I am to lands in the traditional territories of the Sauk and Fox nations. I acknowledge these ancestral tenders as a truth practice and reminder of the violence in our shared history, which has privileged myself and my farmer ancestors. Other identities I lead with are white, gender nonconforming, bisexual, and polyamorous. I'm newly discovered neurodivergent. I have CPTSD, severe generalized anxiety, and am chronically ill with Ehlers-Danlos. I've trained in connection and community building with Desiree Attaway, Beautiful You Coaching Academy, and in Carmen Spaniola's attachment-based, trauma-informed facilitation method. I have a work history in special events and as a stagehand. Plus, I'm a certified data analyst and practicing witch. I hope to explore all these topics and more on Asteria's Convos. So here we go! Hi, and welcome to Asteria's Convos, where we're community building the future. Let's introduce our guests today. Who are you, your name and pronouns, and what identities do you lead with? And I'm just going to light a candle while you tell us about you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Kristyn. I use she, her, they, them pronouns. And my identities that I lead with are I'm a mom, first and foremost, it seems these days. I have young kids, and I often kind of have been thinking of this identity of wounded daughter, healing mother as sort of like an identity or an archetype even. It's this idea that like as I'm raising my kids, I'm also tending to my own like wounded parts. Wounded daughter, the wounded student. I'm also a former evangelical Christian that then became an atheist, skeptical science teacher, and then now I am also a host of the Stoner Story Witch podcast. So there's a lot of we all contain multitudes. And yeah, I also am a neighbor, a small group facilitator. I have within recent months, I've started a pretty profound and hard to describe sourdough practice, which has really been what I think is like a cool ally in relationship building, tending to my community, practicing community care. And I was really excited to be invited onto your podcast, as a matter of fact, because it feels, just looking at the questions that you were sending out, I was like, wow, it just feels nice to take some space and just reflect on what does it look like to be, building community for the future. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Also, there was a specific identity in there that I want to, like, you mentioned being a neighbor as one of your identities.
Mm.
And tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So so within the last 2 years, it was about a year and a half ago that we moved to these Chorotega lands, colonially referred to as Costa Rica.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's been a lot of people who live around me are fellow expats, and there is more so an emphasis on being a good neighbor. What does it look like when there's, kids involved and there aren't aunts and uncles and grandparents, just down the street kind of thing. And a big part of that has been, if I'm baking a lot of sourdough, then I'm just like walking it over to my neighbors and I'm just sharing it. And then it kind of like becomes this thing. And then it's, I'm in a practice of then if I need something, I can feel more enlivened to ask for it, which, I grew up on the Dakota lands, colonially known as Minnesota. I lived in a suburb for pretty much my entire childhood. And then, yeah, like there just wasn't there wasn't the like relying on the people that are literally going to be, pulling you out of rubble in a natural disaster, or yeah, like watching your kids when, you have like a car trouble, or maybe when you got to go take your spouse to the hospital. That like these things have, the earthquake hasn't happened, but what does it look like to be building community at like the most local level? And that is like the people that are literally, yeah, within my street. And it's just been something that I've really been reflecting on out of necessity. And it's just one of those really interesting things where it's, you know, did it take me moving to figure this out? Maybe it did, but I'm in the practice of figuring it out now.
Yeah. So, what are you learning about community since you moved to Costa Rica, and how are you building community there?
Oh, okay. So how have I learned about community since? So yeah, with the desire, and I mean, it was like 10 years in the making, this like dream mode of moving to Costa Rica. It's like, okay, we're going to get married. My partner and I were like, we'll get married, start a family when the kids are, approximately these ages, and like it honestly kind of panned out that way. But a big thing that I knew going into it was like, I wanted to build more community. And what that looked like very realistically last year was we had made some friends, and they were going to be temporarily like unhoused for like the month of January or December and maybe January. And rent here is really, really, really expensive because that's the high season. And we were like, it'll be tight, but like we actually do have like an extra bedroom, and so and of course 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 4 months later. Like, we had this experience of like, what does it look like to be, kind of co-parenting other people's kids and having them co-parent my kids, and they've got different views on, on certain things, but how do we negotiate that, right? Like we've committed to making this work, and what does it look like from the beginning to say, what would it take for this to be a yes? Because of course there's constriction, like, oh my gosh, like sharing my kit, like we only have one kitchen, like to be cooking in the same kitchen. And it was actually through that experience that I started making sourdough, because I wanted to do something in the kitchen, but I wanted to be able to do it at like hours when it's not like, and now we're making dinner for 8 people. And so it was just like, I can wake up early enough, or, just just kind of put it in the corner and tend to it. And then anyway, what I actually found that I really, really loved about that experience was that there were just other adults in our space that could cook. That wasn't just like my little nuclear family that was in charge of feeding us. And that was actually how this, like, I call it I have a WhatsApp chat with my neighbors, but then also kind of a larger community as people are interested. I don't turn anybody away. So if people want to be in this WhatsApp, if they want to be in this WhatsApp group, they're welcome. But it was just, and like this is a practice of tolerating community in a way that capitalism doesn't let it be comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's like, I am going to give. I am going to just, I've started finding that like the sourdough practice actually also started because I was like scared to, I got a podcast episode about it. I wrote a poem about it. I've got like a very spiritual relationship with sourdough at this point. But it started out as like this metaphor for like, okay, I can do a hard thing. And if I can commit to doing it with some regularity over the course of a month, at the end of the month, it'll probably feel a lot easier and a lot less scary. And at the end of the month, I was like, I don't actually know if my body can tolerate not being with sourdough anymore. Like we're such good friends. I have to continue. But then it's like, well, now I'm making more sourdough than is feasible. And then if I think, well, I store my excess in the belly of my neighbor, I'm just going to give it to my neighbor. I'm going to extend it to maybe like the teacher, my kids' teachers, or things like that. And then it's so funny. You start seeing that people start holding back from their receiving. it's like, oh, well, you already gave me one. And like, what can I, like, I don't have anything to give for you. Or like, or they would want to pay me. That's how they were like, let me pay you. I was like, no, I'm not fucking interested in, in, in this becoming like a transactional practice. Cause that's going to be the thing that's going to stop me from wanting to bake. Cause I'm going to be like, $20 for only that. Like it's just there's like there's no way that wouldn't be how that would end. So I was like, that's how the story ends, and I don't want the story to end, and definitely not that way. So then I just was like, well, my capacity in the kitchen is pretty much spent on baking. So if you guys just like ever have extra food, just like make me dinner, or like invite us over for dinner, or you know what I mean? Like just make me food. I'm making you food, or you can make me food, or like I have a neighbor who has like an ice bath practice. And so they're like, you can use my ice bath. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'll use your ice bath. That sounds amazing. Or, like just what is it that you have that you can give with ease and joy and like offer that to me? And I've like, I don't think I've turned anything away.
Yeah. I loved a phrase that you said about storing your excess sourdough in the belly of your neighbors. Did you get that from somewhere? Is
I
that something you came up with?
Thank you for reminding. I did not. I believe that I got that from either Carmen or Ruben, which is how we've met, was
Through the Numinous Network.
through the Numinous Network. I think they mentioned that on one of their collapse Ask Me Anythings. I think I heard it in a collapse course, and gosh, I think so much of they both have just like I just love listening to them talk. I'm very confident one of the two of them like had that little thing, and I was like, well, that is going to live in my brain forever. And so thank you for inviting me to cite the source on that one, because no, that is, but it like I heard it and I was just like, oh my god, yes, like yes, full body yes, like that is what I want, and that's like that is the community that I am trying to bring into the future for sure.
Yeah. I love the idea of food as a connector. Like it's so important. And Ruben talks about that a lot on the Numinous Network. And I also think back to like my grandparents and my grandmother was a homemaker on a farm. And like going back to the early 1800s, all my ancestors, the women say homemaker on the census reports.
Mm.
And I love that homemaker was considered a job. It was farmer and homemaker. And so she was like cooking meals for the community, for all the people that came to work on the farm and all of the people that were around that might need help, or like taking extra meals around when people were in the hospital. And I think there is something that we've lost with the nuclear family on this connection around food, because a lot of societies over time have lived more communally, and food wasn't we weren't really meant to make 3 meals a day on our own in our own houses
Right.
by ourselves.
No. Right. So it's like, so that you're trading community for currency, because it's like, well, it's like and I definitely experienced this in the suburbs where it was just like, oh, I don't like, we can all have our own lawnmower. We can all have our own snowblower. We can all have and it's just like, and then when I started experiencing that as an adult in my neighborhood, I was just like, why? There's only like 3 people on my side of the street. Why can't we just all share one? Or sorry, I'm going down like a weird
No,
rabbit
it's a
hole,
great tangent.
but it's just like, but the idea of I have enough money to buy my own fill in the blank, so therefore I won't need my community. Therefore, like then I don't need to ask for others. And one of the themes that I keep coming to in the Stoner Story Witch podcast is, and because I'm speaking from my own experience, but it's, to me, it's a manifestation of this wealth wound. Like, what is the actual wound that we have to, that's just a byproduct of this? I'm going to sever myself from community in order to get this currency so that I won't need community. And it's like, I want to be making steps to in increasing the community, and then like, and not hoarding the wealth.
I
And
want to
by
be
wealth, I
in
mean like,
relationship with you.
yes, I want to be in relationship with you. I mean, I just,
I don't want
I
to
to
sever myself from the people around me.
Right. And I'll speak a little bit personally and I'll just like, so I had a loved one
Hmm.
that needed some care, and I like they had a big surgery and it was all planned, and I was like and they found out that, because the medical world is just ridiculous. They needed some extra care that like insurance wasn't going to cover, and like how are they live alone. And I was like, I'll help you. And they were really grateful that I went and I visited and I took care of them in this way. But there was very much like for and I was like, I would have done this for you even if insurance would have covered you to live in assisted living. Like I want you to be able to be in your home. I want to make you sourdough and help you heal. I want you to like I want to spend this time with you. I don't want to yeah, there's something really sad to me about just that we live in a world where like yeah we put the elderly in nursing homes rather than like finding a way to actually support them in community. And yeah, there's that's like that is not the future that I am working to build.
Yeah. And that brings me to how are you looking towards the future with your actions? What is the future you're working to build?
Yeah, I mean the future that I am hoping to build is one of community care. It's one where we can do less harm and more good. I think there's also a big part of I think when I think of, you know, community and my upbringing, there's always been like, how can we do more good? And there's often there's also like there's typically a severance of, I have access to certain things that other people, I'm going to do good by that I'm going to do a good thing. Sorry, what is it how am I trying to piece this out?
Take your time. We have so much time.
Yeah. Yeah, that I want to just I want to be building a future where people are storing the excess in the belly of their neighbor, as we say, not not from a place of like trying to do good or even be good, but like because it's the right thing to do. because there's something because there's things that are like less harmful. Like what are the and that there's and now I think I'm just getting distracted because I'm realizing that there's a YouTube clip and I don't remember who it is, but there's this guy that's speaking at this big like philanthropic dinner, and he's kind of speaking truth to power to all these like really rich, wealth wounded people. And he's saying, it's one thing to do more good in the world, but what does it mean to do less harm? And I think I'm looking for a future, and this is The Small and Delicious Life, which is definitely Ruben Anderson, but it's what does it what if what we dream of is to be that he calls it contented peasant, right? Where it's like we are just baking bread for our community, and like that's giving us, this shared rhythm with ourselves and our baking practice, but then also with, our housemates and our loved ones, but then even also our wider community. Because, when I think about community, I was thinking about your questions of what does building community look like? And it's like there's community just in myself. If I think of all the parts that live in me, all
Yeah.
different ages and parts of me, there's also, and then there's also like a spiritual part of that too, like building my relationship with, perhaps with cannabis, perhaps with, like I said, with sourdough, and then also building, not just the community with my neighbors, but then like also sowing the seeds or I guess maybe pollination or whatever of putting some work out there in a podcast form or website or whatever, and just being like, okay, if any little bit of this pollen finds somebody and it's like catching hold, it's like, shoot me an email and like let's gab.
In
and
some of
and I
my darkest times, I often think about like if my work, that idea that if my work only affected one person, is it still worth it? And
Yeah.
it is. It is.
Yes.
And I know that my work, that being there for people, that like showing up for them on the bad days, that celebrating them on the good days, I know that that work has affected more than one person.
Right. That's right.
And I would love if I can inspire more people to just think that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. To like intentionally lean into that work that is like invisible and unappreciated by capitalism, because it's probably actually the most worthwhile work that we can do, quite frankly, right? Like
Right.
how can we be like, you know, caretaking more? And also like there is real capacity issues too, because in order to survive in these systems. So like obviously, you know, but for me it's when I have the choice, when I have, you know, the privilege to be able to be like, well, can I just interrupt my life and go take care of this family member? Like that yes, I can do that.
Mhm.
And I'm going to do that. And I want to be modeling that for, you know, for my kids and for those in my community, that it's like, I don't want to trade in, you know, hoarded resources so that I can't be there for people when they're, you know, healing through a surgery and or whatever the thing is. Like, and it's just wild to me how I'm needing to learn it,
Mhm. Yes.
but I do. And there are parts of me that have felt very ashamed about that. But it's like, but it's the most, but it's just the most normal thing that, of course, I didn't learn this.
Yeah.
Of course, I was taught that, you know, I'll be happy if I can buy like this next thing, or, you know, if I can, or not just if I can buy, but if I can just like be, you know, independent, the hyper individualism of it
Hmm.
all, of just like, oh, like I'll do it all on my own and I don't need anybody. But it's like, but that's, that's so
But no
lame.
man's an island.
Right. Yeah.
No
Yeah.
woman, no
No,
person is an
no
island.
person. Yeah.
We all there's always going to come a time when you need other people. There's always been a time when you needed other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important connection we can have. At one point, I was reading Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and he talks in there about how when we were evolving from apes into people, like one of the first things that made us different was gossip.
Mm.
And we think of gossip so poorly now. We're like, you shouldn't talk about people, you should only
Mm.
talk about ideas. But gossip is how you trade in like this thing has happened to these people and we'll help them with that. Or this is like knowing
Mm.
about the people around you is how you connect with them. And it's necessary. And then the other thing that developed was religion. And so creating ritual around how we're together with each other and spirituality, those are some of the most connecting human factors that do separate us from the apes in the
Hmm.
actual evolutionary path. And so, yeah, it's just so important that we continue to develop those things.
Yeah. I like the relationship to, yeah, the relationship to each other, that like other people in our world exist, even if they're not in physical space. And like we can honor them and we can, you know, we can hold vigil for them. And I love what you're saying about, you know, a ritualistic practice, that there's like a spiritual component that we can build community as well, because I mean, well, yeah, you're saying like there's historical roots for that.
Yeah.
And because like we can not only gather in a space together with that intention, but even if I'm just lighting a candle by myself, or I'm going for a walk, or I'm holding like the intention to commune with the more than human realm, like that's a really that's a really profound practice, because sometimes like capitalism is really lonely, and sometimes you're not going to get gotten by the people you want to be gotten by, and you just, and so it's nice to have those other practices or other resources too. So I like that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm going to
And
remember
I
that. I've never
I
thought
like,
about like monkeys not having like a rich or apes not having like, yeah, but that's so true.
yeah. And also, like, if you're communing with the spiritual, which I know is part of your practice, like, you're in community with, like you said, the more than human. You're in community with your ancestors. You're in community with the people around you, or with the spirits around you, the land. We also like have a thoroughly developed land acknowledgement practice, you and me.
Hmm.
And so like those are all important things to be in community with as well as people.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, and thank you for bringing into the bringing in the ancestors because I likewise also just feel like yeah, that there's obviously my grandmas and long generations long ago like would be making bread and there is just I think something really amazing about remembering some of those ancestral skills or crafts or whatever like there's hide tanning and basket weaving and things like that too which it's like is a way of connecting with like these ancestor parts but then I also think it's like building community with the future because when there aren't plastic bins that we can just buy from the near it's like we're going to need to figure out how to hold things with natural materials again and so like can I be and I know this is like a collapsy thing that Carmen has talked about on some podcasts and all over the place probably but like what is like what are the things that I'm going to want to you know what are the technologies tools skills practices or whatever that I want to be a part of like carrying that lineage through and so yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I make candles as part of my practice,
Yeah.
and I hand dip them from beeswax. And that part's important to me that I don't mold them. I take the time. It takes days to make a set of 6 candles because, like, they need to cool between. And it's not like just sit there and every 5 minutes dip them. I like,
Hmm.
while I have time, I set up
Hmm.
my wax warmer and I'm like, I'll dip them when I have a second.
Yeah.
And that is such a deep practice for me. And then I also put them on my altar and I burn
Mhm.
them like the one I lit for us today. I carved your name into it and put it on my
Oh,
altar with my photo of Asteria so that we can all be in community. And I have my support here from more than human for us to have this conversation.
oh my gosh. I'm so I'm so glad you shared that. I love it. Carve my name in it. And I love that it's like it's this like intentionally long like I am radically choosing to like practice this return like I am it is a return it's a practice of returning I'm going to do a thing and I'm going to rest and I'm going to come back to it and it's like intentionally not convenient
Yes.
because
We
that's the point.
we have to
So that
choose
this
to do things
matters.
that aren't convenient sometimes because it matters.
It yeah because like this matters to me this conversation matters to me and I'm going to honor it with these candles that are like like super like and again it's just in how you reframe it it's like oh they're so putsy to make or whatever but it's like yeah because it's like it's a devotion it's a part of my devotional practice of like that what I'm doing matters and is meaningful
Yeah.
and
And then you
yeah
can take that into relationship with people where like you have to return to them.
yeah yeah
Like you don't just show up occasionally and then be like, hey, people,
yeah
but you return to them and you say, how are you doing today? And you listen to what they said and you hear like, this thing is coming up for me, and you check in with them because that thing's coming up for them. Or like you say to them, hey, I remember this thing from your past. Was this thing upsetting to you? Or I remember this thing from your past. Was this thing
right
exciting for you? And that is how you build deeper relationship and how you build reliance on each other and how you can be together in community.
totally yeah like tracking with like just like the curiosity, and like, I know you to be a person that was really, stressed about this thing, and how is, it's just like for people to, I mean, yeah, you're extending that secure attachment of like, I see you and I know what's been going on for you, and I'm going to reach out. And it's like, yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that if you were not, checking up on them. Pretty like, like being like in a relationship of, yeah, returning. I love
Yeah.
that.
And a reciprocal relationship. That's one of the things I come back to, like reciprocity in
Yes.
relationships.
Oh, oh my gosh. It's so that it's, I'm really, I am definitely going to leave this conversation just feeling really enlivened. I already feel so enlivened that like you see my sourdough practice so well because you like have your candle practice. It's like, oh my gosh, like you get it because you do it
Yeah.
too, right? Like, yeah. So but I didn't always have this, like, so I
What
had to learn.
inspired your sourdough practice and like why did you decide on sourdough?
So it was a lot of nudges. I quested with Carmen and Ruben. Oh gosh, this was a year and a half ago. And Ruben was making sourdough. Like he made bread for us like every day, and it was always amazing. And I was like, oh, like I should, like I would like to, but like it just like it always like just like seemed scary. And then the people that we were living with, like they actually got some sourdough culture, but they were kind of struggling to like make it work. And then I just randomly, another friend of ours said that she had some, and she had luck doing it. So then I started, I don't know. Like I say, I guess I sort of just stumbled upon it, but I think the urgency really hit because like we can't, here in Costa Rica, we can't really buy sourdough. It's like,
Oh.
I can't just trade $5 for it at the grocery store or whatever. Apparently there is a grocery store here. I've never been to it. But apparently for $20, you can buy a loaf of sourdough. I'm like, well, I am not spending $20 on a loaf of sourdough. So I'm going to make it. But that was the thing. It was like, it really was like this metaphor for, I wanted to start doing that. I wanted to get my podcast off the ground, and it just felt really daunting and really scary and just too much. And I was like, well, sourdough also feels like daunting and confusing and too much. But I also don't think it is. I have people with me like nearby that can help me. Like Ruben has done it. I think I can try, and I can just see how good I can get, and I can give myself some sense of self-efficacy and pride that I can do a hard thing. But then it just like took off. And then I started reading Sophie Strand's, or in the midst of this, I was reading, oh yeah, because sorry. I also like had never baked before in my life, but I was like, I need to bring like a kitchen mixer to Costa Rica. That seems like a thing I'm going to need. And because yeah, they're ridiculously expensive here. I don't know that I would have ever bought one had I not had one. And I mean, I don't use it for the bread, but I use it for other things. Anyway, and then I started reading Sophie Strand's The Flowering Wand, Rewilding the Sacred Masculine. And she talks about Dionysus, and Dionysus is this like god, not just of wine, but also like of yeast. And then I'm just like, oh my God, and the way she talks about Dionysus, I can't help but think that there's just this like kind of like interrupting presence. And that there was just something like, was I choosing sourdough, or like
Was sourdough
was,
choosing you?
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's so interesting. Dionysus has come up for me a lot lately, so I think I might like listen to that book that you mentioned.
So
Because
good.
rewilding the sacred masculine sounds
Yes.
particularly interesting to me.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Are you familiar with Sophie Strand's work?
No.
Like she does a lot. I just did a weekend workshop with her called Myths as Maps, but she was talking a big, like my big takeaways where she was, restoring and restoring
Hmm.
like the stories that we tell, like what were the original contexts and like literal ecologies and landscapes that these stories existed, or like how did they, yeah, how, and what we often do in like these modern times is, we just kind of like pluck them out and then we retell them in a totally different context, and everything is shifted. And so so she looks at a couple of those stories. I love a lot of the work that she's done on rewilding or restoring or like rehoming back into the native ecology, these stories, is Yeshua, like the historical Jesus. She's like researched a lot of what that was like. And I have her book here, The Madonna Secret, is a novel, which I also highly recommend if like a more historical, rewilded, animistic version of Yeshua appeals to you. And
Wow.
it's like sexy. It's like, it's the, like that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene, but like, that's of course not, what patriarchal Christianity wants us to like really spend too much time contemplating. So then like, yeah, there are these like other stories that we can engage with. I'm all about it.
Was Jesus actually married to Mary Magdalene?
So like that's the fucking thing, is that like historians are like, yeah, but that's
They
like
were
not
married.
in.
But
Yes.
Christianity's like, no.
Well, yeah, no, like not in the Bible, because like then you think
Yeah.
about like how the Bible was like canonized and like that. So yeah, oh my God, I don't know I'm not sure what your like familiarity with Christianity or your
I grew
background.
up Southern Baptist.
Oh, okay. Well, I if and when you read The Madonna Secret, I would absolutely love to have some tea and have a chat. And because
Okay.
I'm planning on rereading it actually, because I'm hoping to have Sophie on my podcast in January. So
Excellent.
I've really been like deep in these stories, but yeah.
Mhm.
So, mhm.
Okay, cool. I can't wait to get into that. Let's talk about what are you here to promote for you? Like not just Sophie Strand, but what are you here to promote?
Yeah. So the Numinous Network with Carmen and Ruben,
Because
and
they're
Sophie Strand,
fantastic.
because they're fantastic. They do great work. And I'm basically just I'm creating homework assignments for myself as like a former teacher and hashtag good student, I guess. But I just think like, what is my podcast really? It's just me creating my own homework assignments that over like things that I think are really important. But yeah, I loved that question because I've not, even though I'm like almost 10 episodes in on my podcast, it feels very strange to like promote it. Like I notice myself recoiling a little bit at the sense of like promoting.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because I think for the same reason that like I don't want to sell my bread. Like, but because capitalism has like, yeah, given me the ick.
The
The
ick,
idea.
the marketing
Yeah,
ick.
the marketing ick. It's like I don't want to put minutes in, but then it's like, okay, but what is it that I'm actually like what but then I was like, what is my podcast trying to promote? And then
Yeah.
that was my entryway, because then I was like, why am I struggling with this question? So yeah, my podcast, the Stoner Story Witch podcast, is first off, it's inspired by, I think, the download of like, and it was originally Stoner Disney Witch, but then I thought for like fucking copyright issues, I probably just had to shift it. So Stoner Disney
Yeah.
Witch, Stoner Story Witch. But I was like, what is that? Because it was just like it was a download I got, and then I kind of was parsing it out that, it's sort of the answer to three questions. And I was like, what would those questions be if those were the answers? And it's, how do you connect to your wildness? Or maybe like, if that doesn't land for people, like your most intuitive self. What are the archetypal energies or stories that are guiding or companioning you on the path of your liberation? And what is resourcing you for collective liberation? And I was just thinking about it today. I was like, it's kind of like that, like the street you grew up on and your pet's name or something like that is like your pen name or something like that. That's like, okay, if you create a container with someone else, my podcast is here to promote like those questions. Creating a container, like it could be, just like a particular time or maybe over a duration of time, a particular day, and finding a compassionate community, easier said than done for some folks, and like exploring those stories, like exploring like what are the practices that are helping each and every one of you in this group. Maybe it's just you and a friend, that it's like, okay, what is helping you connect to your wildness? what are stories that are speaking to you? And a lot of times it's just like, oh my gosh, I just cannot stop reading this subversive smut right now. I am doing a season on Severance and I cannot stop reading subversive smut. What is that? And it's like, because it is then resourcing me for collective liberation, because it's like, I'm doing this work and I've kind of committed to this one thing, but it's like, if you can just think of, okay, I don't need to have it all figured out. I can just be like, okay, in my like moments of leisure, I'll read the subversive smut, and I don't even need to know why, because I just know that there's this larger container. It's for me. And I kind of have like, what's my why and what's it for? But I think I've worked out like a couple of questions, because I think what really irritates me about the way stories are told in capitalism, and by this I mean, like a lot of like movies and popular TV shows, is that it's going so well, and I think I know where it's going to go, and then it always ends. What is it that I'm trying to say? Like, I want it to have a more liberated future than the way it actually ends up.
Sure.
For example,
what's an example of that? Yes.
So like Lady and the Tramp is like one that it's a pretty easy. He's a tramp. He can't be like, he wants to be wild. He does not want to be domesticated. But then he falls in love with Lady, and then it's like, oh, okay, the happy ending is he's domesticated. But like, if we're tracking him along the way, like, then well, wait, it's like basically Cinderella, right? It's like we're seeing what it is like to live within a kingdom, and rather than the message be like, we need to abolish the hierarchies that allow it to be possible for like parents or step parents to exploit their stepchildren, like, we just rescue one of them and then like somehow that's okay. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that's ridiculous. And like, so
maybe we shouldn't live in a place where we can lock stepkids in towers.
Yeah, like that would be cool. Or like Frozen 2, I really get irritated because like, I mean, it is like, I was so excited. I was like, indigenous sovereignty. We're going to destroy the dam and like let the Northoldrans like have full reign of their land again. But then like, because Anna did the right thing, like the water of the dam just like disappears, and like she still gets to be princess, and like nothing actually changes. It's like they prepare us for this, these stories prepare us for this big like future shifting moment. And then it's just like, rather than figuring out how Lady can go live in the woods with Tramp has to like be domestic. It's always, it's this colonizing, it's this like collecting, like, okay, anybody at the fringe is just then going to succumb to the capitalist narrative of.
Okay, how did you feel about Encanto?
Oh my God. Okay.
In like brief.
So I have like a 20-page Google Doc about Encanto, so I might need you to be more specific about what it is you want me to speak on about Encanto. Like, what in particular?
Well, okay, this idea that you were just talking about, that they set us up for a big, big, big thing. And then how did you feel about the ending of Encanto?
So the house broke down.
Yeah. The house broke down.
Yes.
I felt like it was like a big, big, it was a change from some of those stories. And it really, it showed actual emotional growth.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. For whatever reason, I felt myself being like, that you being like, oh, like what? And I was like, well, I loved Encanto. So I was like, wait, what didn't you? I was like, what did, like,
I loved Encanto.
Okay. I loved Encanto too. Oh my gosh, I want to have you on the podcast and we can gab about it. Okay. I love, like, it's the movie opens and closes with Abre los ojos. What do you see? Because is the only one that has glasses. And so I think that like, a big part is that like she has like, I think she's similar to Bruno. Maybe it's like every generation has their own black sheep, or
has their seer.
Has their seer. Yeah. Because he was the visionary, and she has this ability to like, to see people in the way that you're talking about seeing people with your candle practice. It's like, okay, like Luisa is saying she's fine, but she's actually cracking under the pressure. And Isabella is like, and her own bias actually. And we actually see this really human part of her, because she actually doesn't want to hug Isabella, but she's like, okay, I guess and it's not even about the hug itself, but it's like, okay, can you actually, have these hard conversations. It's so easy to just, I'm going to save the magic. And it's like, I've saved the magic by like, like
listening to
reconnecting
people.
by listening to people. Meh. And she fucking is standing up to, her grandma, but also like Encanto was refreshing because like there was no villain. It was just intergenerational trauma. And like that to me was pretty perspective shifting, because you could actually say that about any movie where there is a villain. You could say that, like, even Ursula or something like that is really, it's just that, hurt people. And she's okay. I got other thoughts on Ursula, but that it's because she's existing in this hierarchical kingdom, and there's patriarchy, and there's
that phobia.
Oh my God, so much.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Encanto is great. And I liked that the house, like that whole, like the house had to fall apart. They all had to lose their power. They had to like build it back. And of course, that's like the classic thing in shows, and is that there's the time warp, right? Like it's just in one song, we're going to do the hardest work ever.
Yeah.
And there's the one part that like pisses me off is like Bruno is apologizing in that song that kicks off the medley. If I were like prepared to talk about Encanto, but he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then they're like, you have nothing to be sorry about. Like, we're just glad that you're here. And I was like, excuse me. He is not the one who should be apologizing.
Yeah.
And like you guys just being like, oh, it's okay. Like, and I was just like, oh, like they were just, it's,
there's a moment that could have been caught there where they said, no, we were in the wrong.
Yes. We were like, yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I love about Encanto is that the community comes together for the whole family, right? So they're like, you've taken care of us for generations. And it's time for you to let us take care of you. Yes. Because you have to be able to receive care.
Yes. 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 I think I sobbed the most in that movie, in the lay down your Lord. And I was like, oh my God, the community is helping them. Oh my God. Because like they didn't want to be, and like they didn't want to be seen for like, we are only giver. Like, and that's the other thing. It's like, it's easy to be a part of community when you're the one giving, but it's like, okay. And like, you need this now. And
you have to be able to receive to be a part of community. It's actually biologically, we build more connection with people through giving care. So if you don't ever allow people to give you care, they have less investment in you as a person.
Yes.
And less connection to you. And so you're cutting yourself off from more connection by only being a giver.
I believe it. And it's, yeah. And it's just, and I don't, have you, oh yeah. Carmen has read the poem Reciprocal Rhythm by Tony Spencer.
It's one of my favorite poems. And if we had, actually, do you mind if I kind of end this by reading that poem?
I think that's how this needs to end, honestly.
Okay. I have it pulled up actually, because it's just one of my favorites.
Oh, me too.
Okay, so this is Reciprocal Rhythm by Tony Spencer. There is a reciprocal rhythm, a flow between things, a velocity of reciprocity that builds a village, builds a dream, builds the world. For we are kin, and kin means I need you, and you need me, and the sun, and the water, and the soil, born of things long dead. Most of us grew up in little boxes made of ticky-tacky. My house, your house, my plate, your plate. In the desert, there's one plate at dinner. One plate where we all tuck in, fingers first, food for all. I want that. I want you to ask me for stuff. I want you to ask because asking is the kind of boldness we need. Tell me what you want, and I come a little closer to you, and we dance. It's not the yes or the no, but the asking that rocks the world to this rhythm. And the ticky-tacky begins to crumble. Walls fall, and we need each other all the more. There is a reciprocal rhythm. Let me give you things. Don't hold back your receiving, because it leaves us both bereft of the kinship that ties us, reminds us of our entwinedness as ecological beings. I cannot, No, I will not survive without you. Okay, yes, some kind of half living, but not the kind I'm worthy of. Not the kind you're worthy of, and not the kind they are worthy of. Help me, not to fix, but to fill the heart, not to trade, but to till the soil of interbeing that is all there has ever been. There is a reciprocal rhythm, and it's not in 4/4, for it doesn't follow straight lines. It's a wild rhythm where I help you, and you help her, and she gets to stop, and he gives all he has for love. There's a reciprocal rhythm, and it's not in 4/4. Yeah. Thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you. I just feel like I've thought
Yeah.
about it so much throughout this talk. I was just like, I just feel like I'm just trying to live out this poem. And it's like, wait, you know the poem because we've been
I
in
know the
shared space
poem.
where this poem has been read. So yeah,
Yeah.
I read it. I read it at the beginning of every women's circle that I lead. And I always like have a loaf of sourdough there. And so then when it's like we all like tuck in fingers first, food for all, one plate, it's like I purposefully have like one plate and like we're literally all just like everybody's like pulling off a little piece. Ugh.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay. I have so much more to say about that and talk to you about, but we're
We'll just have to
coming.
do this again sometime. I'll have to
Yeah.
have you on my show. I got a couple little like nuggets of thought for sure that I would love to like pollinate and water and see what grows. So
Okay. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll talk
yeah,
to you
thank you
soon.
so much. All right, take good care.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in to Asteria's Convos. You can find the links for this episode in the episode description. You can find me, Asteria Elzea, on TikTok, Instagram, and Threads as at asteria.elzea, and on Blue Sky as at Asteria Elzea. Spell it Asteria dot Elzea. Please leave a review on your favorite podcast hosting service. That's the absolute best way for our community to grow. Remember, your actions create the future. All my love, Asteria Elzea.